Good morning, and thanks for joining us here on Treasure Coast Solutions. Wednesday mornings, we talk about some financial issues or economic issues that may affect you financially. Some of the things that you might want to be aware of, some of the issues that are going on nationally and maybe internationally, to kind of give you a little bit of a heads up on some things you might want to consider. And the purpose of the show is not financial planning, although from time to time we do talk about things that can impact your financial planning, or you may want to be aware of when you're planning for your future. But most of it is really just to kind of talk about some economic issues that that may impact you, and more importantly, to kind of talk a little bit about some of the mystery behind some of the economic issues you hear about, because a lot of times there is a lot of smoke and mirrors to convince you that something is possible when it isn't. And that's the thing about economics, is that it actually is a science, not an art. Although the guys that do it tend to be artists in what they do, I think they're very good at kind of spreading the paint on the canvas. But it's good to understand really what the outcome is going to be, because with economics, it's more of, if I do this, I get this. If I do this again, I still get this. So, and that's what we talk about a little bit on the show. We've been talking about the new tax act, and that's uh, and all of a sudden things have gone radio silent relative to that. We're hearing stuff that now the bill is going to be reduced from 3 trillion to 1.5 trillion. So let's talk about what that means as we're starting here, because I think it's important to understand exactly what that means, and how the legislature, and in particular how the progressives, and I'm just, I'm not one to get into a lot of political gyrations. So let's just be specific, and instead of calling them progressives, let's use the Bernie title and just call them socialists, because that's what they are. So let's look at how the socialists and what they're talking about when they're talking about their package and what they want to accomplish. So I want to get into that a little bit here this morning. I should mention my name is Mark Breckbill. I'm a CPA. I was in the banking industry for 13 years. Started banks. I was in the mortgage industry for a while. I was involved. I couldn't keep a job, so I did a lot of different stuff over the years, and fortunately, and it's been interesting. I mean, I learned a lot. I always say the time I spent in the banking industry was really, really worthwhile, because I was fortunate enough to be high up in a big bank. I was a CFO, so I was dealing with finance every single day, and not only finance for some of my clients, because when there would be a financial issue, a lot of times that the loan officers maybe weren't familiar with, they would come to me for assistance there. So I got to see some of what was going on with the customers, and then of course dealing with the financial issues and the structure of my own bank was pretty interesting and informative. So I do have to admit that all those slings and arrows that I got during that period of time, some of them were worthwhile. Most of them were not, but anyway, some of them were worthwhile. So I'm a CPA and a banker, and also have been in business, had my own practice here as a CPA in town for, I guess, about 25 years or so, a little more than that. But anyway, so been around for a while, which just means that I've had that opportunity to suffer more than some people have. But so it's funny, when I was in the banking industry, there was a there was a guy in the banking industry. His name was Sheshanoff. He was the big guru in banking, and this was a long time ago when they were first coming out with money market accounts, and nobody had, money market accounts weren't legal. Some of you are old enough to remember when you could not, when the bank could not offer you an interest rate that was higher, that you could get your money out right away. You had to have a CD or a passbook savings account. Remember the passbook savings account? You couldn't write a check on the account. You had to go in and get your money out and put your money in. So that was in those days. That was long time ago. But it was banking was an interesting process. I've seen a lot of stuff happen in that period of time. But um, when we were looking at some of those things back then, there was a lot of changes in the industry. And Sheshnoff used to say he had these slide presentation when he was teaching bankers about the how to implement this stuff and what to do and everything. And I remember it was always one of his slides was really, and in those days we didn't have PowerPoint presentations. These were slides, right? I mean, it's just amazing. Somebody had pictures, and he used to speak at these lectures and lecture at these programs. And I remember he was talking about early adopters, those people that were into these money market accounts early, and that happened up in the Northeast. I think in one of the New England states was one of the first states to have those. And remember, his point was he showed this guy cowboy out on out on the range, right? And the guy's the early adopter, and then he's got all these arrows in his back because his point was that sometimes you learn the hard way when you're out on the what in technology is referred to as the bleeding edge. And so it was an interesting process because we did learn a lot of finance and economics the hard way. But you learned what was going to happen. You were dealing with financial issues, and so you learned what really did happen in the real world in economics and finance. So it was kind of an interesting process. Anyway, we're going to talk about a couple things here this morning. If you want to add a comment or call in, I don't claim to be an expert. We're just talking about things. 220-9788, 220-WSTU is the number in the studio, and be happy to get your point or question on the air if you want. You don't have to give me your name. You can disguise your voice like they do on TV. That's really cool. As a side note, it was funny. I was talking to somebody talking about disguising your voice, and I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were trying to remember when we first realized that that news was no longer the real thing, that it was biased, and that it was slanted, right? And so we both actually had almost exactly the same experience, but on a different thing, but almost exactly the same experience. For both of us, it happened in Kiwanis, when in our Kiwanis meeting at one point, and it both had to do with 60 Minutes. So 60 Minutes actually took away our virginity as it related to feeling like you were actually getting the news. So some of you remember 60 Minutes was the first news show that was designed to make money. Most of you don't in the olden days, news wasn't supposed to make money. It was the loss leader. Your news department was never going to make money. It was there so that people would come to your station or your network and watch all the other stuff where you sold advertising. But you didn't sell advertising during the news. Remember, in the old days, news, you didn't have any commercials. They didn't have that kind of stuff because they weren't going to make money. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose was to deliver the news in an unbiased manner, and then there was entertainment that they made their money off of. So news and entertainment were completely separate. And so it's funny, but 60 Minutes was the first show that tried to be news that could make money. And what happened is they found out that wasn't really possible because people didn't want to pay for news. They wanted to pay for entertainment. So 60 Minutes became entertainment. And I think, and so it's funny for both of us, this other person, myself, it was a 60 Minutes program that created that realization that this isn't news anymore. It is been doctored to be entertainment, skewed to what they want you to hear. They want sensationalism. They want something that, is going to generate ratings and advertisers, and in particular advertisers. So I thought it was kind of funny because to show how different it was, 60 Minutes had the clock. That's so that they could get those commercials in, right? Because this wasn't news anymore. That should have been our first clue. This isn't news when we had a clock that was showing us when the commercials were going to come into play. But anyway, so what happened, which was for both of us, it was 60 Minutes. It was revealed at a Kiwanis meeting we were attending, and it showed us what was going on. In fact, and for both of us, it was also a situation, was last time we ever watched 60 Minutes. But so I'll tell you the individual situations. The one was a dentist, and the other person was a dentist for Qantas and all that. And this was a situation where they were talking about, I think, they had some stuff in there about amalgams or whatever they are that they were doing with teeth, and they were trying to point out how, I think it was poisoning people and what it was doing and all this kind of stuff, and the people knew it, and all of that, and this individual knew all about that stuff and knew what they were saying was absolutely wrong. In fact, not even just a little off, it was like 100%. And kind of it was interesting, because it was at that point they knew that show had been doctored, that there was no medical basis in what was being done. It had been doctored and changed to make it dramatic. In my situation, I was in Illinois at the time. I was in Kiwanis Club in Pekin, Illinois, outside Peoria, downstate. And at the time, there was a power company in Illinois that was building a power plant, a nuclear power plant. And that was in the day where there were all the protesters on nuclear power. Nobody wanted you to build nuclear power. Everybody was out there strapping their arms to, wrapping themselves around trees and threatening to blow themselves up. And it was a really, really difficult time. So you had the businesses, the utilities that were in effect quasi-governmental, that were being encouraged to produce nuclear power because it was cheaper and less of an effect on less dependent upon oil and things like that. And of course, then you had a number of activists who were, primarily liberal environmentalists, who didn't want these power plants to come about because they were sure they were going to kill the environment and all this kind of stuff. So you had these really divided, this two sides of the coin type thing, and so what happened was, the power company, and I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but the power company allowed 60 Minutes to come in. Now, one of the first things, and what they did is they filmed the 60 Minutes show. They filmed ran the tape the whole time, and then they did a comparison. This is what happened, and they had the live film, and then this is what went on the air, and then they had a person that traveled around to kind of show that movie. And again, keep in mind, this power plant was, only 2 hours away from where we were at, so people kind of knew, and we knew what was going on, but and so it hit home, and so what was going on supposedly is that there was all these corners that were being cut, and these whistleblowers were afraid to step forward, that they'd be killed, that the management of the company would kill them literally kill them if they. And so they were so afraid that they masked their voice and they put them behind a screen, and the whole bit, right? And so they it was great. I mean, when you saw the show, you saw 60 Minutes. It was definitely, they had hard and fast witnesses, people that even the president of the company that was building the power plant admitted that that it was a that there was big problems, and that stuff was being cut. And well, they filmed, like I said, they filmed what actually happened, and then they showed what 60 Minutes ran and what the actual on-air clip was. Now, with 60 Minutes, one of their criteria in the old days, I don't know what it is now, but you're not allowed any editorial review. They can do whatever they want, and you have no control over it. So, however they splice it, however they put it back together, it may be 100% inaccurate. You have no ability to do anything about it because you sign a waiver that they have the right to do that. So they storm into your offices with cameras blaring and everything else. They get you to sign this stuff and ask you to defend yourself, right? So, I mean, this stuff was to the point that they actually cut the president of the company off mid-sentence and then added stuff that said "but" to make it seem like he had said the first part, but, and then said the second part. And in reality, there was a whole bunch of stuff that was cut out, spliced together, and it completely changed his answer. I mean, 100% changed his answer. So it was interesting. I mean, to see what they could do. And the reason I'm spending a little time on this is because today you hardly hear anything from the media about this budget plan that's currently in process. And that's the problem. And so some of this demise in our freedoms starts way, way back with the time when we no longer were given unbiased communication about what was happening. When you lose media to one position, party, viewpoint, ideology, you lose the ability to have the freedoms that you're used to. And it doesn't happen all of a sudden. It there is a realization point when you realize that it's happened, and then some people revolt when that takes place. Some people get upset when that takes place, but by then it has already happened, and it started years and years and years ago. And so this plan that you're not hearing anything about, that Congress is still dealing with, you're hearing it has been going on. The movement to a ideological position of socialism has been moving in that direction in our country for 45 years. And it started like every type of overhaul of a government occurs, any type of conversion to socialism or communism, it occurs by taking over the media. And it's not by the state stepping in and taking over the media. A lot of people think that, so that's what they do. The government comes over and takes over, and there's no free press. Yeah, they don't necessarily do it that way. I mean, especially in a place like the United States, what they do is that people with their same beliefs take over the networks and then help only show, because they believe that's all that's important, only show what they want you to see, what they want you to hear. And slowly but surely, the small bastions of media freedom go away, because they now are considered radicals. They're now the ones that are fixing the news, that are presenting a position that's not true. Why? Because the other side has already created a new reality that doesn't really exist, but they've created this in the mind of the public, and the public can't move off of that because they think they're getting unbiased information. People are searching for the truth and they think they're getting it. For some of us, myself and my dentist friend, we came to that realization about 45 years ago as a result of 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes was, in effect, a come to light show for many people. Many of us remember when Mike Wallace actually completely fabricated a story. That's when he went off the air. But we remember when he completely fabricated a story. And at first, 60 Minutes tried to back him up. And then it became obvious that it was all made up. And he knew it was made up and purposely presented it that way because it jived with his philosophy. And so, so for some of us, 60 Minutes has been the one that has kind of caused the issue for us. A little of the interesting point, I told you that for my Kiwanis Club, this utility company was going around they would show the TV clip and then they would show the real thing, what happened. And they were traveling around to civic clubs, Rotary and Kiwanis, and making the tours to all of those clubs to let those people know what had really happened. And they got sued. They got shut down. The CBS brought the big guns out, big attorneys, shut it down, got them for copyright infringement, and actually protected so that the utility could not show what really happened. And it was and they were able to do it. They were able to shut them down in court, so that they could no longer show anybody what really happened. They couldn't defend themselves. And it was interesting. It was funny because the company knew who the whistleblower was. They had fired him for incompetence and for endangering the lives of people he worked with because he was drunk on the job and all this kind of stuff. And they knew exactly who it was. They didn't need a screen. That screen was done for everybody knew. The company knew. Everybody knew who these couple whistleblowers were, and both of them had been terminated for cause that had nothing to do. They actually were creating the problem that they were claiming, that they were creating the safety problem that they were claiming that the company didn't care about, because they were the alcoholic that was potentially on the job messing up the construction. And there had been all kinds of construction delays, and a lot of it had to do with these very people, why the construction delays were occurring. So it was kind of interesting that even back then we allowed the courts to protect this negative position, this hidden agenda. And here we are now. Here we are today without a free press who doesn't want to look at this. And I'm including a lot in the without a free press, because we've got all kinds of entities out there, many of which that are pushing their own power position too. There's Republicans that aren't opposed to this socialist agenda because they think they will turn it into a fascist agenda. So, because there are people who care only about power, there are people who care, and they are in the Republican Party. They care about power. They care about re-election. They feel like if they can get in there, they can control it, and if they're given the power, it's a good thing. And that's a bad thing too. That stuff has been things that we've dealt with in history, and none of that's good. But what we've got today is nobody that's shining any light on what's happening. Now, part of that's on purpose. The Democrats, and in particular the socialists in the House, and those of you that are angry because you think I'm using a name, I'm calling somebody a name when I say they're a socialist or a communist. Are you calling somebody a name when they call themselves a socialist? I don't think so. So let's try to back off of the correct terminology, the politically correct terminology, I guess, for some of these people is what, progressive? Well, why? That's just a name that they've used to cover up the fact that progression is socialism it's progression to socialism. So that's what's progressive about it. They're on their way to socialism. So let's just call it what it is. It's a form of control, but it's also a market method that's different from capitalism and the free market system. It is socialism. It is the control of income and the redistribution of wealth. Don't be embarrassed by that. If you won't talk about it, that's when they've got you. They don't want you to call it socialism. They get upset when Bernie and AOC call it socialism, even though they're bolder and bolder with that. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party is called the progressive wing because they don't want you to call them the socialist wing of the party. They don't want to be socialist Democrats or Democrat socialists like we have overseas. They want that hidden because they know the American public won't buy that. So they have to label it with another brand. And so that's what you've got to be vigilant on what's happening, because right now nobody is making that information available to you, and the courts have already taken a position that has allowed our free market system to go away, and that was the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act eliminated the capitalistic system and emboldened and made permanent the ability to have socialism in the United States. And how'd they do that? Well, it's like I said, nobody stands up someday and says, we're socialists and we want you to join our cause. We're running as socialists. We want you to join our cause. That doesn't happen. People become socialists outwardly. They state they're socialists when they know the public wants what they've got and will support them. So you don't go out and get elected as a socialist to change a capitalistic system to socialism. You get elected as a progressive, as a Democrat, or as a liberal, whatever you wanted to call it in the old days, and then you push the system to the point internally that it becomes socialism, and then you run on that success, in your opinion. Once you've got people dependent upon the socialistic system, now you want them to reelect you as a socialist because you will then keep that in place, and they won't lose the free healthcare, and they won't lose the free education and the free money and the earned income credits and the child care and whatever, the thousands of programs that they've designed. So that's how it works. And we've got a lot of people out here that are waiting for that person to come in and say, I'm proposing that we go to socialism. And so they're not worried because that, in their opinion, that hasn't happened. When that happens, it's too late. When those people actually say that we're socialists, this is the system we want, it's already in place. You lost. There's no going back. And unfortunately, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, did that. That is the point. If you want to point to the place where the United States became socialist, it was when John Roberts ruled that the Health Care Act was unconstitutional as an act, but it was not unconstitutional as a tax. And we hear the whole concept tax and spend, but that's how socialism occurs. It's actually spend and tax, not tax and spend. So if they taxed in advance and then spent it, that would be a different story. But what they do is they spend it and then tax to justify it. So it is a spend and tax program that we have already implemented through Affordable Care Act, through Social Security, through Medicare, through a lot of things that are permanent parts of our system right now. So we've already implemented all of that. So now, so what's happening in this tax act is Bernie is a smart guy, and Nancy Pelosi is a smart woman. They have had a lot of practice. They are legislative experts. They know how to manage the system. They know how to play government. And that's actually what it's all about. They're all about power and the ability to play government. They know how to game the system, and they're doing it. That's why Bernie's in charge of this tax program. That's why he put it together for the Democrats in the House, because he knows how to write socialism into the tax law. And he now, thanks to Chief Justice Roberts, he knows how to make it legal. He knows how to do it so that it can't be unwound. All he has to do is do it as a legitimate tax. And the only thing it has to be to be taxed is it has to, what we thought, the only thing that made it legitimate was that it had to raise revenue. Interestingly enough, the Trump administration came in and said, well, we're going to take away the penalty that was in the Affordable Care Act. We're going to take away the penalty. That was the key to everything, because that was the tax that Roberts ruled was the tax that made this thing a tax and not a government program that forced you to buy health care, which he said was unconstitutional. Why did he make a difference? Why is it only him? Because the vote was 4-4 and he was the deciding vote. Had he gone one way, it wouldn't have passed. If he had ruled that it was unconstitutional, it wouldn't have gone into effect. His ruling created the Affordable Care Act only because he told the administration what they were telling the public was absolutely wrong. They kept saying it was a health care act and it was not a tax, and it wouldn't be an increase in your taxes, and it wasn't a tax. And he kept saying it absolutely was. So he actually made the case for the administration. The administration lost. They sued and lost, or they were sued and they lost because the court was saying it's unconstitutional for us to do this, to make people buy health care. You have to change the Constitution to allow us to do that, to make that something that the government has authority on. Otherwise, they don't. It's up to the individual. It's up to the states. So that's what happened. That's when the decision was made. Now, interestingly enough, the Trump administration removed the penalty, and then they immediately challenged it to say, how can it be a tax if it doesn't generate revenue? And you know what? They didn't win that. Everybody thought they would. That was a no-brainer. That was how the Republicans and the Trump administration thought they were going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act fairly easily, was that all they were going to do is take it out of, make it so that it didn't generate any revenue. It didn't have a tax associated with it. And then Roberts couldn't say it was a tax. But in reality, he did. He said even, the Supreme Court ruled that even though it didn't raise revenue, it was still a tax. So now, what did that tell the socialists? It told them all we have to do is call it a tax. We don't even have to charge somebody. And actually, taxes can be negative taxes. Think about that a minute. Taxes can be negative taxes. How does that occur? They're credits, and they're refundable credits, which means that not only do you get a credit against your taxes, but if you don't have any taxes, we send you money. That in the socialist world is referred to as universal income. It's called universal income. We send you money every month because everybody deserves a universal income. Would you vote for that? No, that'd never get through anything. That would, first of all, it would be subject to filibuster in the Senate because it's not a reconciliation item, and second of all, nobody. There's all kinds of statistics, all kinds of polls that show that people don't support socialism. So is that ever going to get through like that? Well, no, that would never be acceptable. But if you make it so that's what they would call it, universal income. In reality, if you want to know what it's called in the tax code, it's referred to as a refundable child care credit, a refundable dependent care credit, a refundable earned income credit. And by the way, earned income has a limit so that the So supposedly the credit is only available to people who are below certain incomes and have certain family sizes. But what did they do? They eliminated those caps. They raised those caps. They eliminated the family size. You don't have to have family at all now. You can be eligible just by yourself. You don't have to be married. You don't have to. You can qualify. And I think the income limit that's being proposed, or that has been put into place, not being proposed, this is already happening. Money is already going to people's houses as universal income in the form of a refundable earned income credit, child tax credit, dependent care credit. They're giving people that credit in advance of preparing their tax return, knowing that in this program, they're going to make that permanent so that they don't have to use that money against taxes. They just get it. If you get an earned income credit, regardless of what your earned income is, the purpose of an earned income credit was to provide a subsidy to people so that they could live. It was primarily designed to help the working poor. It was to reduce their tax burden when they were just getting by. The working poor now is $150,000. Those are working poor now. And that number's going up. Why? Because the government wants that check in the bank account, not even in the mail. In the old days, they used to say put it in the check in the mail. Now it's going directly into your bank account. Why? Because they have the bank account, because thanks to COVID, we gave everybody a bunch of money. And to give everybody a bunch of money, we knew how much money, we knew where their bank account was. So we didn't even have to ask people if they wanted their money back. Supposedly, we've always had the ability to get your earned income credit back. You just had to basically show that you were entitled to it, and then you would get it. But you had to ask for it, and you just had to ask for your company, and they would give you a credit, but you had to ask for it. The government this time said, no, you don't have to ask for it. We're just going to send it to you. In fact, they didn't even tell you how you could not get it. Because they just want to send it to you. It's universal income. It's called a tax credit, but it's universal income. So it's a tax credit. It'll be allowed. Have you heard about that? Are you aware of that? No. You don't know it's in here. You haven't seen this. Nobody's telling you this. And all of the conservative networks, which there's only, a couple, they're not focusing on this because unfortunately they're distracted by shiny objects. So unfortunately, you've got the networks that may be opposed to socialism, that say they're opposed to socialism and communism. They're out there dealing with smoke and mirror stuff, while the real socialists are in government changing the government. And they're not even dealing with it. Every night, you shouldn't hear anything about the border. You shouldn't hear anything about all of the other distractions. We shouldn't be hearing about Afghanistan. We shouldn't be hearing about any of that. What we should be hearing about is the socialist agenda that's being written right now in the House of Representatives and will become law if we don't stop it somehow. And I don't know how to do that because the socialists have the vote to make it happen. You should be afraid. You should be afraid. This isn't the past. This is the leap from free market to socialism. We are there. It's all being done through the tax code. It's all being done in a manner that you won't know because it's games that have been played and they're winning. They've won. They've got it. Now, so you say, well, you know what? I heard Joe Manchin saying he's not approving anything above $1.5 trillion. He's drawing a line in the sand, so this can't happen. So, we're not dealing with a 3.5 trillion bill anymore. We're dealing with a 1.5 trillion bill. Well, let's talk about how the government counts. You wouldn't think that counting and accounting would be something that's complicated, right? You would think 1 + 1 = 2. This friend of mine who's a dentist has a website that you sign up and you update your patient information, right? So if you haven't been on there for a while, you don't have a password, or you probably forgot your password or whatever. So you put your name in and you get your password. So there's a question that you got to answer to make sure that you're not a robot, you're not somebody trying to bust into their system. And I think the question was 2 plus 2 equals. And so you have to answer that, right? Well, that's a leap. You're suggesting that we actually know what 2 plus 2 is. But what I told her and I complained about is it was the wrong answer, because for a CPA, 2 plus 2 equals whatever you want it to be. That's what we do for a living. So that answer is whatever you want it to be. That's how we count in Congress, whatever you want it to be. And that's how we make the number work. We have been doing it for generations. This is not just how the socialists count. This is how Congress has counted. This is how the Republicans have counted. This is how the unbiased Congressional Budget Office counts, all of which is garbage, all of which is smoke and mirrors. So let's talk about that $3.5 trillion socialist plan that's been proposed. Okay. Well, I can tell you this about it. First, it's actually $6 trillion. Say, well, no, it's 3.5 trillion. The budget office has already gone through and they've done their analysis, and it's $3.5 trillion. Well, it is not, because of the way it's written. If I want to get 3.5 trillion into the system, and let's say I want to get 6 trillion into the system, and I know I can only get 3.5 trillion done, what I do is give you all of the things I want to give you. I take away all the things I want to take away. I take it away for a full 10-year period of time, because the budget requires that it be evaluated over a 10-year horizon. So what I do is I have all of my taxes that go into effect over a 10-year period. Any of the ones that are really atrocious, I don't start them for a couple years, 2-3 years, so that I don't have to scare anybody, right? So when I'm going to confiscate, so what I do is I lie to you and tell you I'm not going to take any more income from you if you make over $70,000, under $70,000 a year, under $80,000 a year. Your taxes are not going to change. But what I do is, in the short run, that answer might be true. In about 3 or 4 or 5 years, you are going to pay a ton more taxes. I'm not going to call it a tax. I'm going to call it inflation, but you're going to pay it. And it's going to hit you more than it's going to hit the person that makes $400,000. Also, at some point, the amount that represents what you used to make is going to go down. And so therefore, and those, but the amount that you have to pay tax on is going to go, the amount of tax you're going to have to pay is going to go up. So again, using inflation and other things, I'm going to accomplish all of that just down the road, but I'm going to put it in, and it's going to be big numbers. And because nobody's focusing on those first 2 or 3 years, that's how I raise the revenue. And that revenue, lo and behold, raises $3 trillion. Now, it might raise most of the $3 trillion right up front. It might raise, a bulk of $3 trillion that I can put it in play, but I don't have to raise it all up front, because what I have to do is just make sure that over 10 years, the numbers balance out. So if I spend $6 trillion and over a 10-year period of time, and I have income of $3 trillion over a 10-year period of time, then technically the administration is correct when they say this costs nothing, right? But that's not true, because they're going to spend money for half the 10-year period, and then they're going to say, we're not going to do this anymore. Yeah, right. So you're sending somebody $3,000 a month in universal income called a tax credit, and you're going to change the tax laws in 5 years to say that they can't have that anymore? Nope, that ain't happening, because those people are going to go out and they're going to elect whoever tells them that they're not going to do that they're going to keep the $3,000 a month. The funny thing is, by that time, they will be arguing over $3,000 a month that they're taking home that will buy the equivalent of what probably $500 buys today. But they'll argue it because it's $3,000, and they now, because of what's been done, they now need that money to survive. They can't pay for healthcare now, even if they wanted to. They don't have the income to do that. The businesses that they work for can't pay them that kind of money. They may have lost their job. The bottom line is they are going to be dependent. You make somebody dependent upon it, and they will continue. Why do you think heroin dealers give the first few away for nothing, right? This is heroin in government. Socialism is all about giving it away, locking them in, and you can't change it. Friends, this does that. This tax law does that. That is where we're at. Once they've given you this, you cannot take it away. Somebody one time, they asked somebody one time, why is it that somebody would vote for something or do an executive order? That was it. Why would you put in place an executive order that you know the next administration can get rid of? And I'll tell you why. And this is a good point. I hadn't thought about it. The reason is because the government never gets rid of anything. Once it's there, they will cut the program. We're going to cut the program. They never cut the base program. They cut the increase in the program. They don't cut the funding. They just freeze it. But once you get it in the budget, it's there. It's almost impossible to get out. So that's why presidents put executive orders in place that they know are going to be overturned immediately. Look at President Obama. He put a number of executive orders in place to protect the Health Care Act. He knew the next administration was going to change all of those. But once they're there, you can't get them out. And once you give people stuff, you can't take it away. So the point is, they've now reduced the $3.5 trillion, which again is really $6 trillion. They've reduced it to $1.5 trillion. If you've been paying attention to this, how did they do that? Right? They've just cut off how long they're going to do it up front. They've just got to make a bigger splash. So what's going to happen is you're going to get all of these benefits in the next 2 years, hopefully prior to the next election, so that by then everybody says, I'm not cutting off the gravy train. I'm getting a lot of money for free. I don't have to work now.